I'm 66 years old. I spent 28 years as a homicide detective, and I've seen every kind of evil there is. But I'd never investigated a case where the victim was my own son. Never had to build evidence against people who'd sat at my dinner table and call me family. But now my son is dead, and what kind of a father would I be if I didn't get his murders to justice? This is the story of how I found out who killed my son and what I did with them. The call came at 2 in the morning, the kind that splits your life into before and after. I was dreaming about Catherine, the way I always do when sleep finally comes. In the dream, she was young again, laughing in our kitchen, sunlight catching her hair. Then my phone screamed and she vanished, and I knew before I answered that someone I loved was dead. Mr. Blackwell? This is Officer Chun with Asheville PD. There's been an accident on Route 74. My son died on that mountain road with the sharp curves and no guardrails. The one he'd driven 1,000 times coming home from work. They said his car left the road at mile marker 23, went through the trees, dropped 200 feet. They said he'd been drinking. Blood alcohol .09, just over the legal limit. Evan hadn't touched alcohol in 3 years. I know this the way I know my own name. The way I knew Catherine's heartbeat in the dark. I was there the night he earned his sobriety coin. Sat in that church basement on metal folding chairs while my only child stood and said the words that must have cost him everything. I watched him fight through holidays and weddings and bad days at work, watched him white-knuckle his way through every temptation. The coin was in his wallet when they pulled him from the wreckage, 3 years engraved on the back, proof of a promise he never broke. But the police report said alcohol. The witnesses from his work dinner said they saw him drinking. His business partner Kyle gave a statement saying Evan seemed fine, maybe a little buzzed, nothing concerning. And just like that, my son's 3 years became nothing, erased by a toxicology report and people who claimed they knew him. I'm 66 years old. I spent 28 years as a homicide detective with Asheville PD, and I know what an accident looks like. The angle of impact, the skid marks, the way a body moves through space when control is lost. I know the difference between bad luck and bad intentions. This wasn't an accident. But I didn't know that yet. Not with certainty, not with proof. Not when I identified his body on Wednesday, my boy cold on steel, his face somehow peaceful like he'd just closed his eyes for a moment. Not when I picked out the casket on Thursday, wrote the obituary that said, beloved son and husband, because that's what you write even when you suspect the marriage was something darker than love. Not even when I stood at the funeral home on Friday, shaking hands with people who kept saying how sorry they were, how unexpected, how tragic. I knew it during the service. In a moment so small, I almost missed it. The funeral was full. Evan had that gift for making people feel seen, feel important. His business partner Kyle gave the eulogy, and I'll give him this. He seemed genuinely destroyed. His voice broke twice. Once when he mentioned their 10 years working together. Once when he called Evan his best friend. People were crying. Sienna, Evan's wife, sat in the front row in black Chanel, a veil covering her face, her body shaking with what everyone assumed was grief. Kyle stood behind her through most of the service, one hand on her shoulder, offering comfort, being the good friend. But I watched that hand. I'm trained to watch, to notice the small things people do when they think no one's paying attention. Kyle's thumb moved in small circles on Sienna's shoulder, slow and rhythmic, and the touch lasted too long. For seconds. 5. The kind of touch that speaks of familiarity, of knowing someone's body, of having touched them before in circumstances that had nothing to do with grief. I filed it away, told myself I was seeing things, that grief makes you paranoid, makes you suspicious of innocent gestures. Kyle was Evan's best friend. Sienna was devastated. I was an old man looking for patterns in chaos because patterns make sense and loss doesn't. But then my nephew Mason, 11 years old and sharp as his grandfather ever was, leaned close during the burial and whispered, Grandpa, why does Aunt Sienna keep looking at her phone? I followed his gaze. Sienna had her phone partially hidden in the folds of her dress, screen glowing. Her thumb moved across it, scrolling, and for just a moment her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't grief either. Then she caught herself, tucked the phone away, pressed a tissue to her eyes. Maybe she's looking at pictures of your uncle, I said, but Mason frowned. She keeps typing, like she's texting someone. At her husband's burial. At my son's burial. And whatever she was reading made her expression shift from sorrow to something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. I wanted to believe I was wrong. Wanted to believe that grief looks different on everyone. That maybe she was coordinating with family or handling logistics or doing any of the 1,000 things that need doing when someone dies. But I've spent 3 decades studying human behavior, learning to read the micro-expressions that betray what people try to hide. And what I saw on Sienna's face wasn't the relief of distraction or the comfort of connection. It was the look of someone receiving good news. The reception was at my house, the one where Catherine and I raised Evan, where her coffee cup still sits in the cabinet because I can't bring myself to move it. People brought casseroles and condolences, told stories about my son that made him feel both more real and more impossibly gone. Sienna held court in the living room, accepting sympathy with the grace of someone who'd practiced for this moment. She told the story of how she and Evan met, graduate school, coffee shop, instant connection. I'd heard the story dozens of times. It never varied. Every detail stayed frozen in place, which should have told me something. Real memories shift and change with each telling. Rehearsed stories don't. I stayed in the kitchen, watched through the doorway. Kyle remained close to Sienna, anticipating her needs before she voiced them. When she wanted water, his hand was already reaching for a glass. When someone asked about the business, he redirected the conversation. When her face started to crumble, he had a tissue ready. Either he was the most attentive friend in the world, or he knew her rhythms the way you only know someone you've studied closely, someone you've touched in the dark. My phone buzzed. A text from Martin Geller, Evan's attorney. Need to see you. Alone. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Tunnel Road Diner. Don't mention this to anyone. I stared at the message. Martin was old school, the kind of lawyer who called, who scheduled through his secretary, who never used words like alone or don't mention. Something had rattled him badly enough to break his own protocols. I deleted the message and poured coffee I didn't drink, watching Kyle's hand rest on Sienna's shoulder, watching her lean into him like he was the only thing keeping her upright. Martin was already in a booth when I arrived the next morning, coffee cup in front of him surrounded by rings on the table. He'd been there a while. His eyes had the hollowed-out look of someone who hadn't slept, and when I slid into the seat across from him, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. He just pushed a manila envelope across the scarred formica. Evan revised his will last week, he said. His voice was flat, professional, but his hands trembled slightly. Tuesday, March 7th. 6 days before he died. I didn't open the envelope. What did he change? Everything. He cut Sienna out completely. Left everything to you. The house, his share of the business, the life insurance. All of it. The diner noise faded into nothing. Somewhere a waitress laughed. A dish clattered in the kitchen. I heard none of it. I was back in that church basement, watching Evan stand and admit what had broken him, watching him fight his way back to something like whole. I was thinking about the phone calls where he'd seemed distracted, distant. The last time I saw him, 2 weeks before he died, when he'd hugged me too hard and said, "Love you, Dad," like he was trying to memorize the shape of the words. Why? I asked. Martin chose his words carefully. He didn't give me specifics. But Warren, I've done estate planning for 15 years. I know the difference between a man protecting assets in a divorce and a man who thinks he's running out of time. Evan was the second kind. He was frightened. I opened the envelope. Standard will, legal language, asset distribution. But paper-clipped to the last page was a note in Evan's handwriting, the same scrawl that used to leave messages on the fridge when he was a teenager. Dad, took the truck. Back by 10. Love you. This note said, Dad, watch Sienna. Don't let her know. Just watch. Trust no one. Love, watch Sienna. 2 words that meant my careful, methodical son, who never acted without thinking, who inherited my need for evidence before accusation, had suspected his wife of something terrible enough to warrant those words. 2 words written 6 days before he died on a dark mountain road with alcohol in his system that shouldn't have been there. Did he tell you anything else? My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Just that if anything happened to him, you'd understand. He made me promise. No mail, no phone call. In person, away from everyone. Martin's jaw tightened. He asked me a hypothetical question when he came in. Asked what would happen to his assets if he died before filing for divorce. I told him it would all go to his spouse unless he changed his will first. And then he changed it. The next day, we sat in that booth while my coffee went cold, while the morning crowd filtered in and out, while my world rearranged itself around this new information. My son had been afraid. Afraid enough to change his will. Afraid enough to leave me a warning. And 6 days later he was dead. What do I do with this? I asked. Martin looked at me with the expression of someone who already knows the answer. Evan told you. Watch her. I drove the long way home, past the office where Evan worked, past the beautiful colonial house he'd bought for Sienna, past the church where he'd earned that coin. I ended up on Route 74, at mile marker 23, standing where my son's car had left the road. The skid marks were still visible, 40 feet of locked brakes, which meant he'd seen the curve coming, had tried to stop. The tree was scarred black from impact. Someone had left flowers, cheap grocery store carnations, not the roses Sienna would have chosen if she'd bothered to come here at all. I stood at the edge where the guardrail should have been and looked down through the trees. 200 feet of nothing, then broken metal and shattered glass and the end of everything. If you were drunk, you wouldn't make this curve. If you were sober, you'd see it coming and slow down. But if you were impaired just enough, if your judgment was off by a degree or two, if your reaction time was delayed by a second, then this curve would kill you, and it would look exactly like an accident. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. Typed, victim, Evan Blackwell. Suspect, unknown. Method, unknown. Motive, unknown. Day 1. Then I called Sienna. She answered on the first ring, her voice small and fragile, the grieving widow. Warren? Is everything okay? Just checking in. How are you holding up? It's so hard. A pause, a delicate sniffle. Everything reminds me of him. I don't know how to do this. The estate will take time to settle. Lawyers, paperwork. Could be months. The silence stretched just a beat too long. Months. Maybe longer. These things are complicated. But the life insurance, that's part of the estate. Another pause, and when she spoke again the fragility had evaporated. How long is longer? Hard to say. Could be 6 months. Could be a year. Warren. Her voice had an edge now. I have bills. The mortgage. I can't just wait indefinitely. I understand, but how long until I can access the money? Not how do I cope without him? Not what do I do with all this grief? How long until the money? As long as it takes, I said. She hung up. I sat in my truck in the fading light and thought about that conversation, about how quickly her voice had changed when I mentioned delays, about the question she'd asked first, the one that mattered most to her. Then I opened the glove box and pulled out the pocket notebook I'd carried for 28 years, the one that had tracked murderers and rapists and thieves, the one I thought I'd retired along with my badge. I opened it to the first blank page and wrote, Sienna Blackwell, subject of investigation. Below that, my son asked me to watch. So I'm watching, and I already see what he saw. She's not grieving. She's waiting. I've been picking Mason up from school every Tuesday and Thursday since Catherine died 7 years ago, when Evan was still alive to worry that I was too lonely rattling around in that big house by myself. Now Evan's gone and I keep the routine because routine is the only thing holding me together, the only structure in days that would otherwise collapse into nothing. Mason climbed into the truck that Tuesday, backpack hitting the seat, and I could tell immediately that something was bothering him. He's 11, but he's got his grandfather's face, open and honest, unable to hide what he's feeling. How was school? I asked. Fine. He buckled his seatbelt, quiet for a moment. Then, Grandpa, I saw Aunt Sienna last week. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where? Vincenzo's. That Italian place. We went there for my birthday dinner on Thursday. He paused. She was with Mr. Kyle. Thursday. 5 days after we buried Evan. Were they having dinner? Yeah. They were at a table in the back, but I saw them when I went to the bathroom. They were laughing. Like, really laughing. And Aunt Sienna kept touching his arm. I drove 3 blocks before I trusted myself to speak. You sure it was them? Yeah. Mom saw them too. She said maybe Aunt Sienna needed a friend to cheer her up, that everyone grieves different. He turned to look at me. But Grandpa, she didn't look sad at all. She looked happy. Out of the mouths of children. Mason had seen what I was only beginning to suspect, had cut through all the adult rationalizations to the simple truth. Sienna wasn't acting like someone who'd lost the love of her life. She was acting like someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Is that okay? Mason asked. To be happy that fast? I thought about Evan's note. Watch Sienna. Trust no one. Everyone grieves different, I said. But the lie sat heavy in my mouth, and from the look on Mason's face, He didn't believe me either. The package arrived that afternoon, priority mail from a company I didn't recognize. L. Tanner Investigations, Charlotte. I almost threw it away, assuming it was junk mail, but something stopped me. Maybe the fact that it was addressed to me personally. Maybe the fact that it was marked personal and confidential in red letters. Inside was a 47-page report and a cover letter on professional letterhead. Mr. Blackwell, per your son's request, please find enclosed the complete surveillance report on subject Sienna Blackwell, conducted February 1st to March 12th. Your son retained our services to document and verify suspected infidelity. Payment was received in full. Our condolences on your loss. If you have questions regarding the enclosed materials, please contact our office. Lou Tanner, Senior Investigator. The date at the top was March 13th. This report had been finished the day before Evan died. My hands shook as I turned the page. The report was thorough, professional, exactly the kind of documentation I would have demanded in my own investigations. Timestamps, locations, photographs, a timeline of betrayal laid out in black and white. February 3rd, 6:47 p.m. Subject observed meeting Kyle Brennan at Riverside Hotel Bar. Interaction appeared intimate. Physical contact observed. Hand-holding, close conversation, body language indicating romantic involvement. February 10th, 8:23 p.m. Subject and Brennan entered room 412, Riverside Hotel. Exited together 11:15 p.m. The pattern continued through February and into March. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, always when Evan was traveling for work. Always the same hotel, often the same room. The documentation was meticulous. Parking garage timestamps, hotel security footage stills, credit card receipts showing Kyle had paid for the rooms. There were photographs. Sienna and Kyle in the parking garage, standing close, his hand on her waist, her face tilted up toward his. Another photo of them leaving the hotel, her lipstick smudged, his shirt untucked. The images were grainy, taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking what they showed. The affair had started 18 months ago, right after Evan had closed his biggest contract, right after the business had started generating serious money. I flipped through page after page, watching my son's marriage revealed as a lie, watching his wife and his best friend betray him in 100 small ways that added up to something monstrous. On the last page was a yellow sticky note. Flash drive and envelope contains encrypted audio files. Your son said you'd know the password. He said it was something only you would know. I found the drive, small and silver, and plugged it into my laptop with hands that wouldn't quite steady. 3 files, all password protected. I tried Evan's birthday, Catherine's birthday, our old address. Nothing worked. I sat back and stared at the screen, thinking about what Evan would have chosen, what secret he thought only I would know. Then Catherine's voice came back to me from across the years, from the night Evan was born, when I'd held my son for the first time and cried, because I'd never thought I'd be a father, never thought I deserved something so perfect. You kept saying the same thing over and over, Catherine had told me later. You kept saying worth it, worth every hard day, worth every sacrifice, worth everything. I typed, worth it. The files opened. The first audio was dated 6 months ago. Restaurant sounds in the background, dishes and conversation, and then Sienna's voice, clear and close. She must have been wearing a wire, or Evan had planted a recording device. Either way, he'd been gathering evidence for months. We could just wait for him to file for divorce, Sienna said. Kyle's voice. And then what? He gets half of everything. You walk away with nothing, and I lose my business partner. I'd still have the insurance. If you're still the beneficiary, which you won't be once the divorce starts. First thing any lawyer tells you is change the beneficiary. Silence. The clink of ice in glasses. Sienna, thoughtful. There are other options. Don't. Kyle's voice was sharp. Don't say things like that. I'm just thinking ahead. Planning for contingencies. A soft laugh. That's what I do, baby. I plan. The file ended. I sat frozen, the laptop screen blurring as tears filled my eyes. My son had recorded this. Had sat somewhere. In his car, in a restaurant, I didn't know where, and captured his wife casually discussing his death like it was a business decision, like he was an obstacle to be removed rather than a human being she'd promised to love. And he hadn't come to me, hadn't told me, had just gathered evidence with the methodical patience I'd taught him, building his case piece by piece, doing everything right. Except he'd run out of time. The second file was dated 3 months ago, a phone call, Sienna's voice tight with something that might have been excitement. The policy's through the contestation period now. If anything happens after this month, they have to pay out. No investigation, no delays. Kyle, why are you telling me this? Because we need to be smart. Patient. We can't rush things. Sienna, I don't want to know about this. You're already in it, baby. You've been in it since the first night at the riverside. You think you can just walk away? Go back to being his friend. Pretend none of this happened. I am his friend. I care about him. Sienna's voice went cold. No, you're my partner. And partners need to be on the same page about the future. Silence. Then, what future? The one where we have everything we want. The business. The money. Each other. A pause. No, Evan. Jesus, Sienna. Don't be weak about this. You want him gone as much as I do. You just won't admit it. The call ended. I played it again, then again, listening to the coldness in her voice, the certainty. The way she said, no, Evan, like he was a line item to be deleted, like the man who'd built a business and fought his way to sobriety and tried every day to be worthy of the people he loved, was nothing more than an inconvenience. The third file was dated 2 weeks before Evan died. Another phone call. Sienna, he's suspicious. Kyle, of what? I don't know. He's been quiet. Distant. Last night he asked about my schedule, where I was on Tuesday. What did you say? That I was home. What else would I say? A pause. We need to be more careful. Or we need to stop. Stop. Her voice rose. Now? When we're this close. Close to what? To being free. The way she said free made my stomach turn. Freedom meant Evan's absence. Freedom meant his death. Freedom meant everything my son had built, everything he'd fought for, would belong to the woman who'd betrayed him and the man who'd called him friend while planning his destruction. Kyle, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Yes, you can. And you will. Because if I go down, you go down with me. Don't forget that. We're in this together. The file ended. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, poured coffee with hands that shook so badly I sloshed it across the counter. Catherine's photo sat next to the coffee maker, her smile captured in a moment of joy I could barely remember, and I spoke to her the way I'd been speaking to her for 7 years, the way I would speak to her for however many years I had left. She killed him. Our boy. She was planning it, and I don't know how to prove it. Catherine didn't answer. Never does. But I knew what she'd say if she could. Then figure it out. You're a detective. So detect. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Blackwell? Lou Tanner. Got your number from your son's file. Wanted to make sure you received the package. His voice was gravel and cigarettes. Ex-law enforcement written into every syllable. I got it. I listened to the recordings. Your son was one of the smartest clients I ever had. Methodical. Patient. Knew exactly what he was looking for and how to get it. A pause. He knew what he was dealing with. Why didn't he go to the police? With what? Audio of his wife talking about hypotheticals? That's not a crime. The affair is just grounds for divorce. He needed something concrete, something that showed intent and planning. Lou exhaled, and I heard the click of a lighter. He was working on getting financial records, paper trails showing she'd been planning this longer than the affair. He died before he could finish. You think she killed him? I think your son thought she was going to try, and I think he was right. Lou's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. It's exactly what I need to hear. What are you going to do? I looked at my notebook at the first entry. Day 1. What Evan asked me to do. Watch her. Build the case he started. You need help, call me. No charge. Your son paid me enough, and he was a good kid. Deserves better than this. After we hung up, I opened the notebook and wrote, Day 5. Evidence of affair, conclusive. Evidence of intent, strong but circumstantial. Evidence of method, unknown. She was planning something. Timeline suggests she was waiting for the contestation period to end. My son died 3 weeks after that deadline. She wanted to be free. She got her wish. Now I need to know, did she just wait for fate to intervene, or did she make it happen? I pressed play on the second audio file one more time. Listened to Sienna's voice discussing insurance timelines and contestation periods like she was planning a vacation instead of her husband's death. Evan had died 3 weeks after that policy cleared. 3 weeks. That wasn't coincidence. That was a schedule. Kyle called Monday morning while I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by evidence I couldn't yet prove meant murder. His name lit up my phone screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering. Old interrogation habit. Make them wait. Make them wonder. Let the silence build pressure. Warren, he said when I picked up. His voice was measured, careful. How are you holding up? I'm managing. Good. That's good. A pause that lasted just a beat too long. Listen, I know this is difficult, but we need to talk about the business. Can you meet me at the office? Say 10 o'clock. The office. The place Evan had spent 60-hour weeks building something from nothing, where he and Kyle had started with one client and a dream and turned it into a $2 million operation. The place where Kyle had shaken Evan's hand every morning while sleeping with his wife at night. I'll be there, I said. The office occupied a renovated warehouse downtown, all glass walls and exposed brick, the kind of expensive modern space that screamed success. A young receptionist offered practiced condolences and led me to Kyle's office, where he stood waiting in a suit that probably cost more than my truck payment. He extended his hand. I looked at it, thinking about where that hand had been, who it had touched. Then I shook it because refusing would show my hand too early. His palm was damp with sweat. Thanks for coming. He gestured to a chair, and I noted the prepared quality of the gesture, like he'd rehearsed this meeting. Can I get you coffee? I'm fine. Warren, I want to make this as easy as possible. He folded his hands on a desk that was too clean, too organized. I know you're dealing with Evan's estate, and I don't want the business to be another burden on top of everything else. It's not a burden. Still, I'd like to buy out Evan's share. Take it off your hands so you can focus on grieving. He slid a folder across the desk. I had our accountant draw up an offer. For $100,000. Fair market value given current circumstances. I opened the folder and scanned the numbers inside. Closed it without comment. What circumstances would those be? Kyle shifted in his chair. Well, Evan handled most of our client relationships. He was the face of the company. Without him, we're going to see some attrition. Revenue will drop. The business is worth less now than it was a month ago. I said nothing, just watched him, and he did exactly what I knew he would. He filled the silence. Look, I'm trying to be generous here. For $100,000 is more than fair given the situation. Sienna needs the money quickly, funeral costs, the mortgage, you know how it is. And honestly, Warren, you don't want to be tied up in business operations. This isn't your world. Let me handle it. You can focus on what matters. The way he said, what matters, like grief was something you could schedule and complete, like mourning had a timeline and a resolution. I'll think about it, I said. His smile tightened around the edges. How long? As long as it takes. Warren, I need an answer this week. I have investors interested, but they need certainty. If you're going to block this sale, block what? You made an offer. I'm considering it. That's how business works, Kyle. His jaw clenched, and for just a moment I saw something else beneath the concerned friend routine, frustration, maybe even anger. Fine, but don't take too long. This opportunity won't wait forever. I stood to leave. He didn't walk me out. Angela Morales met me at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the police station, sliding into the booth across from me with a folder already in hand. We'd worked together for 15 years, me as the senior detective, her as the rookie who learned fast and asked the right questions. She was a sergeant now, homicide, living the job I'd left behind. You look like hell, she said. Feel worse. She pushed the folder toward me. Business records for Blackwell and Brennan Consulting. Public filings, tax returns, incorporation documents. Everything I could pull without a warrant. I opened the folder. Angela had always been thorough, one of her best qualities as a detective. Last year's revenue was $2.1 million. Net profit after expenses was $680,000. The business was profitable and growing, with client contracts extending into the next 2 years. Evan had owned 50%, which meant his share was worth somewhere around $1 million if you used conservative valuation methods. Kyle had offered me $400,000, which was roughly 60% below actual value. He's lowballing you, Angela said. By a lot. By about $600,000. Question is why? If the business is doing this well, why is he desperate to buy you out cheap? She sipped her coffee. I checked for recent investor activity, new LLCs being formed, capital calls, anything that would support his claim about interested buyers. There's nothing on paper. If Kyle has investors lined up, they're ghosts. So he's lying. Or he's planning something he doesn't want on record. Angela leaned forward. Warren, why are you digging into your son's business partner? What's really going on here? I'd been waiting for this question, knowing it would come, knowing I couldn't avoid it. Angela was too good a detective to miss the pattern. I pulled out my phone and opened the file containing Lou Tanner's summary report, the one that laid out the affair in stark terms. Then I told her about the changed will, about Evan's note, about the recordings where Sienna and Kyle discussed insurance timelines and being free. Angela listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to something harder, the look she got when a case suddenly became personal. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. You think they killed him? She finally said. I think they wanted him dead. I think they had motive and opportunity, and I think the timing is too perfect to be coincidence. I leaned forward. What I don't have is method. I can't prove how they did it, or even if they did anything beyond create the conditions and hope for the worst. The accident report says alcohol. Witnesses say he was drinking. Evan was 3 years sober, Angela. 3 years. He fought for every single day of that. People relapse. You know that. Stress, emotional pressure, not like this. Not overnight. Not at a work event. I pulled up the photo of Evan's sobriety coin on my phone, showed it to her. This was in his wallet when they pulled him from the car. He carried it every day. Does that sound like someone who'd suddenly decide to drink? She studied the photo, and I watched her detective brain work through the evidence, weighing probabilities, building theories. Even if you're right, even if they got him drunk deliberately, you can't prove murder. Negligent homicide maybe, or reckless endangerment. But that's hard to prove without evidence they knew he'd drive, knew that road would kill him. I know what the challenges are. I worked homicide for almost 30 years. So what are you doing? What's the play here? I thought about Evan's note. Watch Sienna. Trust no one. I'm watching. I'm waiting. I'm building the case he started, the way I taught him to build one. Patient. Thorough. Document everything. And eventually the truth comes together. Angela was quiet. Then, you need help, call me. Unofficially. I can't use department resources, can't officially reopen a closed case without new evidence. But if you find something solid, I can help you get it to the right people. I will. She stood to leave, hesitated. Warren? Be careful. If you're right about this, if they really planned Evan's death, then they're smart enough to have covered their tracks. And if they think you're getting close to the truth, they might decide you're a problem that needs solving too. That night, Sienna called. I was in my office, the spare bedroom where I'd spent 30 years keeping case files and evidence boxes, where I'd solved murders and tracked down killers, and learned that evil rarely looks like what you expect. Now the room held everything related to Evan's death. Lou Tanner's report, the audio files, phone records, financial documents, all of it spread across the desk and floor in an organized chaos only I could navigate. Warren. Her voice was tight, strained. Kyle told me about the offer. About how you're thinking about it. Did he? He said you need time. That you're considering it. A pause, and I heard her breathing quicken. Warren, I need that money. I can't keep waiting while you decide what to do with the business. These things take time, Sienna. Estate settlements are complex. How much time? Her voice rose. I have bills. The mortgage is due. I can't live on nothing while you think about it. Accide nothing. Let the silence stretch. Another old technique. People fill silence with truth when they're desperate enough. This isn't fair, she continued. Evan would want me taken care of. He'd want me to be okay. Evan wanted a lot of things. He had plans. Intentions. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that Evan was making arrangements before he died. Protecting what mattered to him. Silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Colder. What do you want, Warren? The truth. About what? Everything. Where you were the night Evan died. What you and Kyle have been planning. Why you're so desperate for money. She laughed, a brittle sound that had nothing to do with humor. You think I'm hiding something. I think you're in a hurry. And I'm wondering why a woman whose husband just died is more concerned about money than mourning. Because I'm broke. Is that so hard to understand? My husband died and left me with nothing liquid. Everything's tied up in probate, in the business, in that damn life insurance that won't pay out for months. I need money now. The mask was slipping. The grieving widow giving way to something sharper, more desperate. I'll review Kyle's offer, I said. Get back to you when I've decided. When I'm ready. Warren, I hung up. My notebook was open on the desk. I wrote, Day 8. Kyle's offer, $400,000 for $1 million asset. Desperate for quick sale. Sienna desperate for money. Funeral costs don't explain this level of panic. What else is she paying for? I flipped back through Lou Tanner's report, found the section on Sienna's finances. 7 credit cards, all maxed out 3 months before Evan died. Total debt, $140,000. But the interesting part wasn't the amount. It was what the charges were for. High-end restaurants, hotels, designer clothes. All the spending had happened during the affair, all of it while she was betraying Evan, using his money to fund a lifestyle with his best friend. And when Evan had started getting suspicious, when he'd hired Lou Tanner, the spending had stopped. The cards had maxed out. The bills had piled up. She'd been living like the insurance payout was inevitable, like Evan's death was just a matter of time. I pulled up Evan's bank records, the ones Martin had given me along with the will. Found something I'd missed before. 3 weeks before he died, Evan had moved $50,000 to an offshore account I'd never heard of. Account holder, E. Blackwell Trust. He'd been protecting assets. Moving money somewhere Sienna couldn't touch it. Somewhere it would be safe if the worst happened. He'd known what was coming. Had known and had prepared. Had tried to protect what he'd built from the woman who'd married him for it. My phone buzzed. Text from Angela, ran Kyle's financials. He's leveraged. Personally guaranteed business loans. If the company fails, he loses everything. He needs to buy out Evan's share before clients leave. Otherwise, bankruptcy. I stared at the message, feeling pieces click into place. Kyle needed the business. Sienna needed the money. And Evan had been standing in the way of both. A problem they'd solved with alcohol and a dark road and perfect timing. Angela dropped the accident report on my kitchen table 3 days later, 43 pages of official documentation that was supposed to explain how my son died. She poured herself coffee without asking, knew where everything was from 15 years of early morning briefings and late-night case reviews. You didn't get this from me, she said. Never do. I opened the report and started reading. The incident summary was straightforward. Single vehicle collision, March 14th at 11:47 p.m., Route 74 mile marker 23. Evan's Honda had left the road on a sharp curve, gone through the trees, dropped 200 feet. He died on impact. Blood alcohol 0.09. Ruling, accidental death due to driver impairment. But the details didn't fit. Skid marks measured 40 feet, which meant Evan had seen the curve coming, had hit the brakes hard. Speed was estimated at 60 miles per hour, right at the limit for that stretch of road. No evidence of mechanical failure. No other vehicles involved. Toxicology was clean except for the alcohol. I pulled out my phone and opened the BAC calculator I'd used on dozens of cases. Input Evan's stats. Male, 6'2", 190 pounds. According to the witnesses, he'd had 3 drinks over about 2 hours. The expected BAC for someone Evan's size was 0.04, maybe 0.05 if he'd drunk them fast and on an empty stomach. Not 0.09. Not even close. This doesn't add up, I said. Keep reading, Angela replied. I flipped to the witness statements. 3 people from the software vendor dinner had given statements, and they all told basically the same story. Evan had seemed quiet, maybe uncomfortable. Kyle had kept encouraging him to relax, have fun, kept buying rounds. The bartender had served Evan 3 bourbon rocks between 8:30 and 10:15, spaced out pretty well. Everyone agreed Evan had seemed fine when he left, maybe a little buzzed, but not drunk. But one detail in the bartender's statement caught my attention. His friend, the athletic guy, kept saying, "Come on, man, one night won't hurt." Like he was really pushing it. Kyle had known Evan didn't drink. Had known about the 3 years of sobriety. Had stood in an AA meeting once to support his friend. Had seen what that struggle cost. And then he'd spent 2 hours pushing alcohol on him, saying one night wouldn't hurt. Where's Kyle's statement? I asked. Angela flipped to the next page. Kyle's statement was short, carefully worded. We were at a vendor dinner. Evan had a few drinks. Nothing excessive. He seemed fine. He said he was okay to drive. I offered to call him a car, but he insisted. I should have pushed harder. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. It was perfect. Every word calculated to portray the concerned friend, the person who tried to help but couldn't have known what would happen. It was exactly what an innocent person would say. It was also exactly what a guilty person would rehearse. I flipped to the scene photos. The curve on Route 74 was sharp, a 90-degree right turn with a steep drop-off and no guardrail. Trees crowded close to the road. At 60 miles per hour, if you missed the turn, you were gone. I'd driven that stretch hundreds of times. So had Evan. He knew this road, I said quietly. Even impaired, even at .09, he knew this curve was here. He'd driven it every week for 6 years. Angela nodded. So why didn't he slow down? That was the question. The one that had been eating at me since I'd seen those skid marks. 40 feet of locked brakes meant he'd seen the curve, had tried to stop. But he'd been going too fast, or his judgment had been too impaired, or his reaction time had been too slow. Or all three. What time did the event end? I asked. 10:30. Last credit card charge is 10:27. Event ends at 10:30. Crash at 11:47. 77 minutes between leaving the restaurant and dying on that mountain road. I pulled out my phone and checked Evan's final messages, the ones the police had recovered from his phone. 10:52 p.m., Evan to Sienna, on my way. 10:54 p.m., Sienna to Evan, just come home. We'll talk tomorrow. 2 minutes to respond. Short. Dismissive. Like she already knew he wasn't coming home. Where was Sienna at 11:47? I asked. Angela slid another paper across the table. Phone records with GPS data. At 11:47 p.m., Sienna's phone had been at 847 Riverside Drive, Kyle's condo building, 23 miles from the crash site. She lied, I said. She told everyone she was home waiting for him. She told the police the same thing. But the phone doesn't lie. I stared at the address, doing the math. Sienna was at Kyle's place. Evan texted that he was coming home. She told him they'd talk tomorrow. But she wasn't home. She was with Kyle. And Evan had been driving away from his house when he crashed, driving toward the mountains, he was going to Kyle's, I said. He knew she was there. He was going to confront them both. Angela considered this. If he suspected the affair, maybe. But Warren, he didn't just suspect. He had Lou Tanner's report. 18 months of documentation. Photos. Hotel records. Everything. I flipped back through the accident report. He got that report the day before he died. Spent all day reading it. Then went to a work dinner where Kyle got him drunk. And then drove toward Kyle's condo instead of home. I imagined it. Evan at that dinner, trying to act normal while his world collapsed around him. Kyle pushing drinks, encouraging him to relax, to have fun. Maybe Evan had one to avoid suspicion, then another because Kyle kept insisting. 3 years without alcohol, his tolerance was gone. His body couldn't process it the way it used to. The event ended. Evan got in his car, texted Sienna. She was at Kyle's, but Evan already knew that. Maybe he'd been tracking her location. Maybe he'd checked before he left. He drove toward Kyle's condo, going to confront them both with the evidence he'd gathered. But the alcohol hit harder than he expected. Judgment impaired. Reaction time slowed. He reached that curve, the one he'd driven 100 times. But tonight his foot found the brake too late. 40 feet of skid marks. 200 feet of nothing. My son died alone because the people he trusted got him drunk and let him drive toward a road they knew would kill him. I need to talk to the bartender, I said. The bartender's name was Marcus Chun, and he remembered Evan immediately when I showed him the photo. We met at the restaurant during the quiet time between lunch and dinner, sat at the bar where my son had his last drinks. Yeah, that's him, Marcus said. Quiet guy. Seemed uncomfortable the whole night. How many drinks did you serve him? 3. Bourbon rocks. I track every pour for inventory. Definitely 3. You're certain? Positive. His friend had 5 or 6 whiskey sodas, kept ordering for both of them. But I only served the quiet guy 3 drinks over about 90 minutes. I pulled out a photo of Kyle. This the friend. Marcus studied it. Yeah, that's him. He was really pushing the drinks. Kept ordering rounds. Kept encouraging his friend to drink up. It stood out because the quiet guy clearly didn't want to, but the friend was persistent. Did you see them leave? Saw the quiet guy leave around 10:30. He seemed okay. Steady on his feet, coherent. His friend stayed for another drink, then left maybe 10 minutes later. 10 minutes. Kyle had left 10 minutes after Evan. Just enough time to make a phone call, to coordinate with Sienna, to make sure everything was in place. Did Kyle seem worried about his friend driving? Marcus thought about it. Not really. Actually, he seemed pretty relaxed. Tipped well. Made a phone call outside before he left. Seemed like he was in a good mood. What time was the call? Maybe 10:40? I remember because I was closing out their tab. I did the math. Kyle called someone at 10:40. Evan texted Sienna at 10:52. Crash at 11:47. The timeline fit perfectly. Kyle had called to tell Sienna that Evan had left, that he'd been drinking. Sienna had then called Evan, confirmed he was on his way, told him to come home even though she wasn't there. They'd been coordinating, making sure Evan would be on that road, in that condition, at that time. Angela and I walked back to the car in silence. When we were both inside, I finally spoke. Kyle called Sienna right after Evan left. Told her he'd been drinking. She called Evan to confirm he was driving, but she wasn't home. She was at Kyle's. Waiting. Waiting for what? I couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the thought that had been building in my mind. They'd been waiting to see if Evan would make it. Waiting to find out if their plan had worked. Waiting to learn if the alcohol and the road and the timing would do what they couldn't risk doing themselves. That night, I drove to Route 74, parked where Evan's car had left the road. The tree was still scarred, the flowers mostly gone now. I walked the curve, stood where Evan must have realized he wasn't going to make it. The road curved sharp right. No street lights, just darkness and trees and a drop into nothing. If you know it's coming, you slow down. If your judgment is impaired by even a degree, if your reaction time is off by a second, you die. And it looks exactly like an accident. My phone rang. Angela. I got Kyle's phone records for that night. He called Sienna at 10:38. Call lasted 4 minutes. She called him back at 10:51. 2 minutes. I stared at the timeline taking shape. Kyle calls Sienna at 10:38. They talk for 4 minutes. At 10:51, Sienna calls Kyle back. At 10:52, Evan texts Sienna. At 11:47, Evan crashes. They'd talked before and after Evan left the restaurant. Before and after Evan texted that he was coming home. They'd been coordinating, making sure all the pieces were in place. I looked at the scarred tree, at the curve that had killed my son, and I knew, absolutely knew, they'd been waiting for this moment. Planning for it. The contestation period had ended. The insurance was secure. Evan was drunk for the first time in 3 years, driving on a dangerous road in the dark. All they had to do was wait. Lou Tanner called the next morning while I was staring at the timeline I'd built across my entire kitchen table. Pins and string connecting dates and phone calls and locations, the physical manifestation of conspiracy. I need to show you something, he said. Can you come to my office? 20 minutes later, I was back in that converted warehouse, and Lou pulled up a video file on one of his monitors. After Evan died, I kept digging. Couldn't help myself. He clicked play. This is security footage from the Riverside Hotel parking garage. Night of March 14th. The timestamp read 11:52 p.m., 5 minutes after Evan crashed. The grainy footage showed Kyle's BMW pulling into the garage. He got out, walked to the elevator, and 30 seconds later Sienna emerged from the building and met him. They didn't embrace. Didn't comfort each other. They just stood there talking, and even in the low-resolution footage I could see the tension in their body language. Then Kyle's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his whole body changed. Sienna grabbed his arm. He said something to her. She stepped back, one hand over her mouth. They'd just gotten the call. The one telling them Evan was dead. Lou froze the frame. Watched Sienna's face. He zoomed in. The image was pixelated but clear enough. Sienna's hand was over her mouth, her eyes wide. But it wasn't shock I saw there. It wasn't grief. It was relief. She knew, I said. She was waiting for that call. Keep watching. Kyle hung up. Sienna lowered her hand. And for just 3 seconds before they remembered where they were, before they remembered to perform their roles, they looked at each other with something that made my blood run cold. They looked satisfied. I'm taking this to the police, I said. Already did. Sent it to Detective Morris this morning. My phone rang. Angela. Warren, we need to talk. Now. Come to the station. Detective Morris was waiting when I arrived, and he wasn't alone. A woman in a sharp suit stood next to him, badge clipped to her belt. FBI. Mr. Blackwell, this is Special Agent Victoria Chun. She's with the Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit. Morris gestured to a chair. We've been reviewing everything you've gathered. The private investigator's report, the recordings, the phone records. And this morning we received security footage that changes everything. Lou Tanner's video. That's part of it. But there's something else. Agent Chen opened a laptop. We ran a deeper analysis on your son's toxicology report. The original me noted elevated blood alcohol, but didn't look further because the accident seemed straightforward. But when we asked for a more detailed screening, she turned the laptop toward me. Medical terminology filled the screen, most of it meaningless to me. But one line stood out. Trace amounts of zolpidem detected in tissue samples. What's zolpidem? I asked, though part of me already knew. It's a prescription sedative. Ambient. Chen's voice was steady, professional. A small dose. Not enough to kill him. But combined with alcohol, especially in someone with no tolerance, it would severely impair judgment and reaction time. It would make him drowsy, confused. It would make that curve impossible to navigate. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Someone drugged him, I said. Yes. And there's only one way zolpidem gets into someone's system. It has to be administered. Mixed into a drink, most likely. Morris leaned forward. Mr. Blackwell, this isn't an accident anymore. This is homicide. Kyle put it in his drinks at the restaurant. That's our theory. Sienna had access to prescription medications through her father's medical office buildings. She could have obtained the drug, given it to Kyle. He mixed it into Evan's bourbon. Your son wouldn't have tasted it. Agent Chen pulled up another file. We also found something interesting in Sienna's financial records. 3 days before Evan died, she made a cash withdrawal of $5,000. No explanation for what she used it for. But 2 days after his death, Kyle deposited $5,000 in cash into his personal account. She paid him, I said. She paid him to drug Evan. We believe so. We're building a case for conspiracy to commit murder, but we need more. We need Kyle to break. Morris looked at me. He's the weak link. Sienna's cold, calculated. She'll lawyer up and never say a word. But Kyle's already shown signs of cracking. The way he came to us before, wanted to confess about the affair. He's got a conscience eating at him. What do you need from me? We're a wire. Talk to him. See if you can get him to admit what they did. Morris paused. I know what I'm asking. I know this is your son. But Kyle trusts you. Or at least he thinks you're just a grieving father who doesn't suspect murder. If you can get him talking. I thought about Evan's note. Watch Sienna. Trust no one. I thought about my son spending his last moments terrified and alone, calling my name as his car left the road. I'll do it. They wired me the next morning. Tiny microphone taped to my chest, transmitter in my pocket. Angela would be listening from a van 2 blocks away. Morris and Chin would be on standby. I called Kyle and told him I'd decided to accept his offer for the business. Asked if we could meet at his condo to discuss details. He sounded relieved, almost grateful. Thank you, Warren. I know this hasn't been easy. Come by around 7. We'll work out the paperwork. Kyle's condo was on the 14th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt, holding a beer, trying to look casual. Failing. Warren, come in. Want a drink? I'm fine. We sat in his living room, and he pulled out a folder with the purchase agreement. I pretended to read it while watching his hands shake slightly as he turned pages. Kyle, I said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you do it? His hands stilled. Do what? Get Evan drunk that night. Push him to drink after 3 years sober. What? The color drained from his face. Warren, I don't know what you, the bartender remembers. Said you kept pushing, kept saying one night wouldn't hurt. You knew he was sober. You knew what that meant to him. Kyle set down the folder. I was just trying to help him relax. He was stressed about work, about the marriage. I thought, you thought what? That 3 drinks would help? Or did you think it would be enough to impair him on Route 74? I don't understand what you're implying. Yes, you do. I leaned forward. You called Sienna right after he left the restaurant. 10:38 p.m. 4-minute conversation. What did you tell her? His jaw worked. I told her Evan had been drinking. That I was worried about him. And what did she say? She said he stopped. Swallowed. She said he'd be fine. But he wasn't fine. He crashed less than an hour later. And you know why? Because you didn't just give him alcohol, Kyle. You gave him something else. His face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Zolpidem. Ambien. Mixed into his drinks. Combined with alcohol, it would make him drowsy, confused, unable to react in time. Unable to make that curve. I stood. Everything's not fine, Kyle. My son is dead. And you helped kill him. I didn't mean for that to happen. You have to believe me. I thought, I don't care what you thought. I care what you did. He was sobbing now, completely broken. What do you want from me? The truth. All of it. On record. If I tell the truth, I'll go to prison. You're going to prison anyway. The only question is whether you go as the man who helped plan a murder or as the fool who got manipulated by someone smarter and colder than you'll ever be. Kyle stared at me for a long moment. Then, she planned everything. Every detail. The timing, the drugs, the route he'd take. She knew he'd be tracking her phone, knew he'd see she was at my place. She wanted him to come here, wanted him on that road. He wiped his face. She said it would look like an accident. Said drunk drivers crash all the time, that nobody would question it. And I, God help me, I believed her. Why? Why kill him instead of just divorcing? The money. It was always about the money. In a divorce, she'd get half of everything, maybe less. But with the life insurance, with his share of the business, she'd get it all. We'd get it all. He looked at me with empty eyes. I loved Evan. He was my best friend. But I loved her more. And that makes me a monster, doesn't it? Yes, I said. It does. The door burst open. Morris and two uniformed officers came through, guns drawn. Kyle Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. They cuffed him while I stood there watching, feeling nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just the hollow ache of knowing my son had been betrayed by the two people he'd trusted most. They arrested Sienna an hour later at her house. Unlike Kyle, she didn't break. Didn't cry. Just asked for her lawyer and refused to say another word. But it didn't matter. Kyle's confession was enough. The physical evidence was enough. The timeline, the phone records, the money transfer, all of it together painted a picture that no lawyer could erase. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Kyle testified against Sienna, told the jury everything. How she'd planned it, manipulated him, convinced him that drugging Evan was just a harmless prank that would help in divorce court. The prosecutor played the recordings Lou Tanner had made. Let the jury hear Sienna discuss being free and waiting for the contestation period to end. They played Evan's final text message. On my way, they showed the security footage of Kyle and Sienna in the parking garage, showed the relief on her face when she got the call. And they showed the jury Evan's sobriety coin, the one he'd carried every day for 3 years, the one that was in his wallet when he died. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. The judge sentenced Sienna to life without parole. Said she'd calculated murder like a business transaction and showed no remorse even when confronted with the evidence. Said she was a danger to anyone who made the mistake of loving her. Kyle got 25 years for conspiracy and manslaughter. His lawyer argued he'd been manipulated, that he'd never intended for Evan to die. The judge said intention didn't matter. He drugged a recovering alcoholic and sent him onto a dangerous road knowing the likely outcome. I sat through every day of the trial. Watched them try to justify what they'd done. Watched Sienna's mask crack once, just once, when they played Evan's final voicemail to me. The one where he said he loved me and was trying to do the right thing. After the sentencing, I drove to the cemetery. Stood at Evan's grave with the flowers I bring every week. Told him it was over, that they'd paid for what they did, that justice had been served. But justice doesn't bring anyone back. Doesn't fill the empty chair at my table or stop me from setting out 2 coffee cups in the morning before I remember Catherine's gone and Evan won't be calling to check on me. Mason visits sometimes. He's 12 now, asking questions about good and evil and how to know who to trust. I tell him what Catherine would have told him, that most people are good, that love is real, but that sometimes we have to be careful about who we let into our hearts. I tell him about Evan, about how brave he was, how he'd fought his addiction, built a successful business, tried to do everything right, how he'd spent his final weeks gathering evidence, building a case, trying to protect what mattered, how he'd known he was in danger and had done everything he could to make sure the truth would survive even if he didn't. Was Uncle Evan scared? Mason asked last week. I thought about the journal entry, about Evan sitting in a parking lot writing what he thought might be his last words. Yes, I said. He was scared, but he was brave anyway. That's what courage is, being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The insurance money went to a scholarship fund for people in recovery. Evan would have wanted that. Kyle's share of the business was sold to cover his legal fees and restitution. The house Sienna lived in was seized as proceeds of crime. Everything they killed for is gone, and they're left with nothing but time to think about what they did. I'm 66 years old. I spent 28 years as a homicide detective, and I've seen every kind of evil there is. But I'd never investigated a case where the victim was my own son. Never had to build evidence against people who'd sat at my dinner table, who'd call me family. Evan left me a note. Watch Sienna. Trust no one. He knew what I'd find if I looked. Knew I had the skills to see what he'd seen. Knew I wouldn't stop until justice was done. My son died on a Tuesday, murdered by the woman he loved and the friend he trusted. But he didn't die quietly. He died fighting, documenting, building the case that would convict his killers even after he was gone. He died the way I taught him to live, gathering evidence, seeking truth, never giving up. And in the end, the truth won. It doesn't heal the wound, doesn't make the loss any easier. But it's something. It's justice. And some days, when the weight of it all threatens to crush me, I hear Catherine's voice from across the years. You did good, Warren. Our boy would be proud. And I believe her. Because she's right.